I publish topics and content all the time. I share, what I learn on social media and whatnot. I mean, that's just what I've been doing for several years. And somebody had commented, a guy that, again, social media just drives me crazy sometimes because you're friends with people that you don't actually even know. And somebody had said, well, do you have a degree in psychology? And I knew where this was going. I didn't want to assume ill intent, but I kind of figured that that's where it would, was going. And I said, no, I have 0 degrees in psychology. And then I left it at that. I didn't validate my answer. I didn't go into my defensiveness or anything like that. I just wanted to see, where this was coming from. And then of course he came back like a day later and replied like, well, why do you think that you have any right to give people advice on this then? And I just was like, I'm not going to answer that either. So I just unfriended and blocked him, because I'm like, I don't feel like and I'm sitting here going like, I'm not claiming to be a therapist. I'm not like opening up a practice of, therapy. Like, why do we as a culture think that only the psychologist and the degrees, and what degree? Neuroscience, psychology, psychiatry. I mean, there's like a handful of, degrees, and it's like, golly, the resistance for people to like just be open-minded to take good advice and experiences from other people. And so I just, like I said, I just decided like I wasn't going to engage, in any kind of defensiveness. I just figured you're not my people. I just don't get it out there. But then when I get an email, like within hours of a comment like that from somebody whose life is being changed at the moment because of sharing this, I go, that's why I think that I have a right to stand up here and say something,
Yes.
because of that right there.
Yeah. Plus you say that at the beginning of your program,
Mm-hmm.
that you're not purporting to be giving therapy, or you're
Right.
not prescribing treatment. You're sharing information.
Yeah.
The psychoeducation is just so important. I mean, people kind of play that down like that's not real therapy. You're not really accomplishing much. But, after all this time doing therapy, so much of what I do is the psychoeducation. It's not all of it, but boy, if you don't have that, then you're depriving them of a tool for their own autonomy, for their own success.
Right. Right. Yeah. And in the, again, the weight that's put, and I'm not saying this because obviously like everything I've learned from people that have studied this, intensely, right? Like you and practice it and stuff. And the closing yourself off, it's like, well, then why are there self-help books? Like, why are there psychology books? Like, being educated and mindful and then pointing people in the direction of other resources for them to explore or ideas to consider or perspectives to share. Like it's all an important part, of all of us becoming more aware and educated on how our brain actually works and how, the influence on our lives that we just have really been cut off from because of not knowing it, or not having resources to really study it the way that we've been able to do it, or the disconnect that I think you've probably even seen is that unless you pursue it, as as an education, like you go out and you get your master's degree or your bachelor's degree in it, you don't have or have like appeared to have the knowledge or access to the research and the reporting and all the studies and all the stuff that can fill in your information because we're not being taught it at elementary schools and high schools. And, there is no basic course. Like we take a nutrition class when we're little kids, to learn that sugar is bad and vegetables are good, but we still haven't integrated the nutrition of what we feed our brains and, what goes on in our lives. And like, we have to catch up everybody with all of, I believe like, that's why I do what I do. Like, that's a profound, like, let's all get us up to that level of awareness. And then the rest of this makes more sense and life makes more sense and our relationships and happiness and, all that good stuff. But
I always think about self-help as being sort of the intermediary between, all kinds of nonfiction books. They're the intermediary between the people that spend their life researching it and understanding it and writing papers and whatever. And then to me, you got to have somebody in the middle that's digesting that and then passing it along to people in a way where they can see what 6 studies had to say, or they can see what, 5 different experts had to say. And then you can, you have a starting place. But without that, I mean, who is going to do that kind of research? Nobody.
Right. Only the weirdest. Oh, yeah. And, and the other thing too that, when I talk, because in this last year, my focus is really starting to go into, its application in business and workplace environments and trauma informed perspectives and leadership, because, workplace and culture is a trigger. It's either a re-traumatizing environment for some people of trauma survivors, or it creates trauma in the lives of people. And I think about it as, again, this advocate and this activist really, for wanting to, do something to help reduce trauma that children are experiencing today through their parents, right? And the role of the trauma survivor is an important part of that, because there is research and there's practice, and then there's the person who's actually tried it all and what works and what doesn't work, and then being able to, like you said, I love that word, digest it. Like, I've eaten it, I've tried it, this is where I think you're going to like it and where you're not going to like it, if you happen to fall into that. And if it's not, there's another trauma survivor out there with their story of how they grew and how they healed. And then here's a face of a real person who's doing the work, not the clinician off to the side or the expert talking down to the people, as if, they have all the knowledge and that the only way to attain it. I guess I think of almost like this in like a church sense, right? Like looking up to the priest, that you can only go to heaven unless you go to church. And, and this priest helps get you there. There is kind of that perspective then with mental health, is that the only way to get to nirvana is through, and it's like, well, sometimes, yeah, actually therapy has been huge for me in that healing part, because crying it out and really digging into some painful issues has been, and with the guidance and support of a qualified, trained person, which I definitely am not that, has been vital to that. But for everybody feeling like afraid of taking the first step, is sometimes they need to see that somebody else did it and survived and got out on the other side and is thriving because of it, in order for them to believe that they can do it, or to realize they're not alone, in feeling that way.
Yeah. And that's huge. That is huge. Just to know that you're not alone, and that this is a human thing. It's that they're experiencing, and it's true of everybody. And that allows you to get behind your own goals and your own ideas, because it's not pathologized the way it is when you're just trying to figure it out on your own.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wasn't really what we were going to talk about today, but that was fun.